1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the world. 1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Crack of the bat, and we are off and running as another episode of Detroit, City of Champions. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And Charles, it's
this is not just any random episode.
A mildly different setting today.
Mildly different. We're down in Portsmouth.
Mm-hmm.
We got down here, and we're with some great people, and we are. This is our first show away from Detroit.
Yep. Took the party on the road, pulled up the mobile kit, and brought it down because it's a very, very important weekend. We've been talking about this, and we've heard the stories about how the Lions were another team prior to being the Lions. And this is where they got their start. It was the Portsmouth Spartans.
This is the birthplace of the Detroit Lions.
And we're just hearing the stories that we've heard already. And we're going to dive deep into, an hour's worth anyway, of the Spartans here in Portsmouth.
Let's not restrict ourselves. We have kept no schedule thus far today. We have kept no schedule as far as location, time, or place. I intend not to follow any more today. I will not be restricted to tell a great story.
I was trying to keep things.
No restrictions.
All right, no restrictions.
No rules.
We'll go till we're out of breath.
There you go. Or until we're done talking, until we're done saying stuff.
We got a lot of people with us today, though.
We got a great group of people here.
Who's hanging out, Charles?
Let's go down the line and introduce ourselves.
So, all right, we got the microphones in hand.
Will Mault, Portsmouth, Ohio. Happy to be here, Charles.
Welcome back.
Will Mault's been on our show.
Jamie?
Will Mault's been on the show
I'm
so
back
far.
again with Mr.
Drew Feight.
Yes, Drew Feight.
Hi, Drew.
Professor Drew.
Yeah, great having you guys down here in Portsmouth.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And of course,
well, my old friends over there that did the radio show, and
we've got
back in Portsmouth, and I told you about Portsmouth, and here you are.
We've got a whole clan of Tom Eurich fans that are these like women that are sitting there going, "Woo!" Like,
well,
Tom, if you remember when we did our Lions and our Lions segment, probably about a year ago, Tom was on every episode. He was on a few episodes of the Red Wings, and we've had our audience clamoring to have you back, Tom. And we've been missing you, and we're glad to have you. Even though we had to come down to Portsmouth just to get you back on air, we're glad to do it.
Well, thank you very much. With all of the champions, when I started, I was 24, and now there's 33.
Yep.
You kids will be behind a microphone for a million years, and you'll still be covering.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pass this microphone over to Randy Yohe.
Randy Yohe, we're glad to have him too. Yes.
Hey, welcome to Portsmouth.
Thank you,
Randy Yohe here. I'm a Detroit native who's worked in Portsmouth the past 30-some years. So this is dual citizenship for me.
Yeah, we got
house divided stuff going on.
I'm a Spartan. I'm a Lions and Tiger fan. I'm a Portsmouth fan, and I'm just thrilled that you guys are here. And for this weekend, that a lot of us have worked hard to put together.
Thank you, Randy. This is a great show. And we're happy to have everybody here. We're
because it's the big 90th anniversary of the Iron Man game. And that is, we'll get to what the Iron Man game is. We mentioned it in the previous episode. I had that. I Facebooked that out earlier about what episode that was. If people wanted to catch up on when we talked about it the first time, but we're going to talk about the Iron Man game. But before we can talk about the Iron Man game and what led to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about football in Ohio and in Portsmouth specifically, and the teams that were here prior to the Spartans, which became our beloved Lions.
Yes.
Our beloved
Lions. They're beloved.
Our beloved
They're
Lions.
beloved.
Our beloved Lions.
Yes.
All right. So
in Portsmouth's beloved Lions, I think too, right? You guys are Lions fans here. I think you guys are still Lions fans. I've been telling everybody you guys are.
Well, yeah. Grab pull that off of the stand there for me. You can just unclip it.
Yeah,
you can just grab it.
There we go.
And Will, you're kind of an integral part in the community here. You have a few businesses, and time for a cheap plug. What places are yours in town?
Salda River.
All right.
Renowned Steakhouse here in Portsmouth, Ohio. And my family has the Portsmouth Brewing Company here in Portsmouth as well.
It's brilliant. So, I mean, you're really tied into this community.
I am. Jamie, I don't want to cut short, but tomorrow we'll be watching the Detroit Lions and Jacksonville Jaguars at the stadium lunch in Portsmouth, Ohio.
And so, how important do people revere the Lions here? Are they interested in the Lions, even though we've moved away? We've been gone since 34, 35.
Yeah. Yes. The Detroit Lions resonate in the Portsmouth family heart.
They break your heart like they break ours.
That's a great question. Do they break your heart? Just like they break ours.
The folks in Portsmouth really tune in when the Lions are doing well. You'll find a lot of Detroit Lion fans in the area when the Detroit Lions are winning football games.
So it's important to know the history and where all this comes from. And we wanted to fill in a little bit about the history. In the history of, because we were talking over a pint earlier, right. and you said you wanted to tell me a little something about the history of football in Portsmouth.
Yeah, well, the Lions really had their beginnings here in Portsmouth all the way back to at least, I would say, 1910, 1912.
There were several iterations before that.
That's right. There were a number of teams here in Portsmouth. Started out as semi-pro teams, like the Smokehouse, that went on to become the Portsmouth Presidents, and then the Shoe Steels with Jim Thorpe.
Jim Thorpe was the player coach. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it's really just a story of a team just building and building and building to greatness. From Thorpe, then you go on to the Spartans, and from the Spartans, of course, you go on to the Detroit Lions.
That's it. Yes. So, Charles, you wanted to fill us in, and we did some research. When I say we did some research, Charles did some research.
I was reading even on the way down here because I was trying to bone up on my Portsmouth early history of Portsmouth football. And to plug this book,
I was gonna say I just hang out and you do all the heavy lifting.
Well, here's the thing: is that there's another Portsmouth resident, Mike Vermillion.
Yeah.
Who I was talking to a couple years ago, and he was telling me about this fantastic book by Carl M. Becker. The book is called Home and Away, and I was like, hey, do you have a copy of it? And he's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I do. And he had expressed interest for the trilogy, the books I wrote. And so we did a straight exchange, a set of, a trilogy of my books for a copy of this. The book is called Home and Away by Carl Becker.
And you were reading a few excerpts from it on the way down here.
Oh, yeah.
Well worth the trade.
Oh, well worth the trade.
The writing in here is
the cover price is, I think what's the cover price in this? The cover price of my trilogy is $100.
Yeah.
And the cover price on this,
$9.95.
I think the cover price, it doesn't have a cover price, but it's like
it's in the QR.
Yeah, so the QR. So where's it? So anyways,
$12.
No, it's not $12. It's like 30, 40 bucks, whatever. But what I'm saying is I don't care what the price of this book is. I love it, and it's worth every dime of the trade. The pure price, that $100 is, like I say, this is worth at least $100 to me because it is an absolutely brilliant book. And
Will, are you familiar with
I am familiar with this book. When it first came out, Glenn Presnell signed the book for you, autographed the book for you when they came out.
Not for me, didn't I? Wasn't have a copy of that one.
That would be worth the $100 trade.
Glenn Presnell's my favorite player. We talked about that when we did the Lions segment. Glenn Presnell's my favorite player.
Was he down here signing a bunch of them?
If I had a copy of Home and Away,
did he sign a few of them down here?
Yes, he did. He signed quite a few of those.
We gotta start digging around some Portsmouth bookshops and see if we can find you a dusty autographed one.
Yeah, if I get a copy of the Glenn Presnell signed Home and Away, that's like all I want for Christmas. Man.
Okay.
All right, anyways, if you see that it showed up in the camera here, it's called Home and Away by Carl M. Becker.
Yeah.
And it is like, it's whether you're interested specifically in Portsmouth or not, if you are a fan of just football history, NFL history, it is an absolutely must read because Portsmouth is not just like some kind of isolated subject that we're interested in because of the Detroit Lions. Of course, that's how we found the subject. But Portsmouth, the story of the National Football League is interwoven it is interwoven with the story of Portsmouth. You cannot separate the story of Portsmouth. You cannot separate the story of Southern Ohio football from the story, from the history of the NFL. I mean, it's an integral part. And when this and Carl Becker makes you understand that, not by saying it, by just by telling you the story of what happened. And what's one of the things I found so interesting about the book was there's a lot of stuff, like it's the way my mind works for history. The way I sort of tries to understand history is I don't remember a lot of the dates always don't kind of escape me. That's the fine details sort of escape me.
It's like me with facts. They're kind of ancillary.
Yeah. And so it's with jokes too. Anyway, it's the punchlines too. Anyways, I just joke. But the way my mind works is that like I kind of know, like, if I know what happened sort of before and I know what happened sort of after, then I like when I see a segment that helps to close the gap, then that's what I remember. And that's what kind of sinks in. It's like sort of concepts in that. And what I mean when I'm talking about this stuff is that the thing that really radiated to me out from this, the like a sort of an integral concept is that when we look at modern day sports, the NFL, baseball, we see these teams as leagues, right? Like you see the National Football League, you see Major League Baseball, you see, you know, the NBA, you see these leagues, and we assume that this is kind of the way that it's always been, that there's just been this core, you know, perfectly formed, like, hey, let's start a football team. Sure, let's join this league. Okay, now who are we going to play? Here's our schedule, right? That's like it's so sort of sanitized now into this like formulaic schedule of teams. You know, if you're part of the league, you get to play these teams, whatever. That's not the way that sports began in this country.
Right.
It's not the way that baseball started, and it's not the way football started.
Oh, it's great. Because one of those stories that you told me on the way up here, it was like the Spartans wanted to play Green Bay. And they're like, no, we don't think so.
They were part of the NFL.
How do you say no?
And the Packers will get to that, but the Packers wouldn't even play them.
Yeah.
And so this is what I mean is like in the early origins of pro football, people played the game because they loved it. They thought it was fun. And then of course, like the city, you know, when you have like the local high school team, and then you have good players, you want them to play a little higher level. You start to potentially, you start like, in order for a guy to play better, you start to pay him more money. If you want a better player to come to your city to help your city win, you pay the guy. So that's how the rise of professionalism. But what ends up happening is when like this is an early component of sports was the basic component, the basic idea of civic pride. Civic pride. That's what in the early days of this country, that's what built sports. That's what built America. It's this idea of civic pride that this is our city. I'm gonna
love it when we get into the numbers that showed up at this game. It's just astounding.
Yeah. But the thing is, so these cities, it was about civic pride. And so what it was these early teams, they added players, they developed their teams. They did it because they wanted their city to be the best. Yeah. That's it. They wanted their city to be the best. For what? Because like when you try to put a business plan together or try to define something and you say, why do you want to do such and such? Why do you want to do this? And it's like, what do I have to have a formulaic, rational, like financial goal, financial capitalistic reason? Or can I just say, because we want to kick your rear end? You know what I mean? Like, why does that have to have any logic? That's what it was in the beginning. It was a simple matter of civic pride. And so it kind of leads into this early story. So the idea is that if you want, so it was like sort of like a circular thing. If you wanted to field a team, that's great, right? Is you needed a little bit of upfront cash. You need to bring some players in. You need whatever sort of players you could afford. But if you wanted to continue to pay those players, the way it worked was you had to draw. You had to draw other bigger teams to your city in order to pay. But those teams wouldn't travel because they're not playing at their home stadium. They're not making any money. So you had to guarantee them contracts. You had to guarantee them money when they came to play at your stadium. So if you're saying, well, hey, we want Chillicothe to come to Portsmouth, they're going to be like, we'll guarantee you guys $25 a game, right? We'll guarantee you $25 per player. And they're like, hey, it's only a half hour away. That's great. We'll take it, right? But if you're trying to lure a team like the Chicago Bears to Portsmouth and you say you're going to pay them $25, they're going to give you the finger and laugh at you, right? But the thing about it is if you're playing Chillicothe, you're like, right, there's nothing, no disrespect to them. But what the thing is about it, it's a local game. It's a regional interest game. So it's a smaller town versus, Portsmouth or whatever. So it's going to have only very local regional interest. Whereas if you brought the Bears into Portsmouth, it's going to have a far wider reach. You might even have 1,000 fans from Chicago coming down to Portsmouth. So you're, instead of having like 500 people at your game, you're going to have 7,000. And so that's the idea, is that your goal in the earliest days of football was to draw bigger and more prestigious teams to your city. So there was no league. It was about drawing teams. It was about drawing prestige to your city, beating them for civic pride, and then thus raising your prestige so that when you went, so that other cities wanted you to go to their stadium and them play you. So that was the early story of really baseball. But I've never seen it illustrated, that concept, in better fashion than Carl Becker did in this book.
Will, you being part of this city, how important is that people are coming and excited about the city?
Yeah, Charles hit it on the head. And I want to tell you, Portsmouth played Ironton, which is how many minutes from Portsmouth?
15,
25 minutes. Iron Tanks. And I believe Glenn Presnell played for the Iron Tanks prior to playing for the Portsmouth Spartans.
Well, that's kind of the next thing I was going to bring up. Is the story of the Ironton Tanks, because any story of Portsmouth, any discussion on the story of Portsmouth in pro football, it actually begins with it. To me, it begins with Ironton, because the idea of the prestige of these teams. There was no more prestigious team, at least in the early days. We're talking about 1918, 1920, where there's the Ironton Tanks are like the story of the Portsmouth Spartans. The Ironton Tanks are what, when you read this book, you will fully understand that for a decade, from 1918, 1920, all the way through 1929, 30, when the team ended, the Ironton Tanks were not just like the best team in Southern Ohio. They were potentially the best team in all of Ohio. They were a dominant force that lost very few games. They were called the Big Red, and they were an absolute dynasty, and they commanded the prestige of the entire Southern Ohio, of the Ohio Valley. And it was them that because of the prestige they gained, that Portsmouth the Portsmouth is twice the size of Ironton, and they're like, why can't we be like them? They were Portsmouth. It's not like they didn't try. They had a team consistently,
Detroit's
but they
big.
could never tap into what Ironton was doing. And Ironton was basically the benchmark that Portsmouth was sitting there saying, we have to beat these guys. And it was the civic pride of Portsmouth that they failed several times, as Dr. Drew's mentioned here. The idea that they started off as the Smokehouse, and then they became the Portsmouth Presidents. The teams were failing. The teams were terrible. There was nothing. The Smokehouse did nothing.
Yeah, Drew, what was the first iteration? What was the first iteration of football for Portsmouth?
Well, you can go back to high school, Portsmouth High School teams before we had semi-pro.
Charles needs a drink. He needs to wet his whistle a little bit. He's going.
I'm fine.
I'm just busting your chops.
But I do need to wet my whistle.
I'm just busting your chops.
I do need to wet my whistle.
So, the fervor over high school football started?
Portsmouth High School had teams back in the 1890s, if not before. But 1910, 1912 is when the Smokehouses formed for the first time. But really, the Tanks and the Smokehouse, that first rivalry, that first match, I think came in 1920 with the Smokehouse playing the Tanks. But the Tanks just repeatedly
destroyed them,
beat Portsmouth,
destroyed
repeatedly.
Them. In the Portsmouth, the best that the Smokehouse ever did was tie them one time for their entire history. The Smokehouse, I have it written down here, 1918 to 1925, folded in 1925. They tied them one time. That was it. And I mean, I have it written down here for the Tanks. This is the Tanks, just to give you an idea of dominance. Okay. This is their
I love their logo too.
This is their record. The Tanks. So from their logo. What's that? What you looking at?
No, go ahead.
So I have it written down here. I thought I had it. Oh, right here. So Ironton's first 7 years in the league, not in the league. There was no league. 1920 to 1926, their record was 59 wins, 8 losses, and 4 ties. They scored 1,256 points, and during that time they gave up 101. So an average of only giving up 14 points a year. Okay, this is one of the most dominant teams I've ever seen. And I just got to mention one guy too is Charlton Shorty Davies. Shorty Davies is like,
was he in the Kinks?
I'm not
different
sure.
Guy. Different Davies.
Potentially different thing. Yes.
Different Davies. Okay.
But this guy, Shorty Davies, like
that's all I do.
When you're reading about the history of these Ironton Tanks, this Shorty Davies is like, they're like Ironton was down to their last quarter or whatever. And like Shorty Davies ran back a 74-yard kick return for a touchdown to win it for him. Like it's repeatedly. Shorty Davies was an amazing player. And then he was a player coach. And then the reason why Ironton was such a monster, and this is what I was really trying to find out when I was reading this. And he makes it very easy to understand. But what Ironton did is that their high school was the center, was the talent generator. And they were the Ironton Tanks were, the Ironton was, fanatic about players only from Ironton and also maybe Ashland, they were fanatical about having only local guys playing on their team. They were fanatical. So what they did was they generated these players in high school. They had a great high school team, and Shorty Davies was also the coach of their high school. So he was the one that helped develop. They were developing players in high school and sending them straight to the best of the Tanks.
Wow.
And so like some of the guys would go to college and come back and play for the Tanks, but they just had this absolute dynasty.
So it's very much a community thing.
Yes.
Randy Yohe.
Yeah, Randy, yeah.
Let me tell you, yesterday, this high school and Ironton tradition continues. 3 things. Yesterday, they played in the state championship.
Oh.
Did they really?
And yeah.
That is so awesome.
And there was a stretch there in the 1990s where they had a coach named Bob Lutz. They just dominated the state for a long time. So that tradition has not ended.
That's awesome.
Second thing for Detroiters, they might want to come down here and take a look at some of this history and see where your Lions and such came from. Both the Tank Stadium and Spartan Stadium are still not only
they're amazing.
Up,
oh yeah.
Randy,
you want to take a
football
seat?
games at them.
Randy, you want to take a seat right here, man?
Yeah, you should jump in. Come on.
Slide over.
Randy, slide on in.
So
we should
the
have
coolest thing is this tradition continues.
Here, take a seat right here.
And the third thing
is
the
tradition
what you said
continues.
about bringing in people and making your team better, it really resonates with the early Portsmouth Spartans. I got a chance to find out that Jim Thorpe played here.
Yeah, we'll get to him.
3 times.
Yeah, we'll get to him for sure.
And each time, I mean, the crowds were.
They're huge.
They couldn't squeeze enough people in there.
So that's so we'll get to him. So what I'm trying. So I want to kind of just make sure.
No,
you're good, man. You're good. No,
because I got a chance to kick a football that Jim Thorpe.
Did you not see the notes?
I kicked in Spartan Stadium. Yep.
No, but it's
John Carpenter.
But it's great to know. But it's great to know that Ironton High School tradition still lasts because
put it through the uprights.
Oh, did you really? Man, I've tried.
I
don't think yeah. Well, it's tough. Field goals are
you want to go over. You go over the bar.
It's over the bar. Impossible, man. They're tough to get going. So anyway, so the idea with this early football concept is that it was all about prestige. It was because prestige led to drawing power. If you were able to had drawing power even if your team stunk and your team wasn't a name brand, if you had a name brand that came to your team, you could draw crowds. That was the idea.
Much like
drawing crowds led to money.
This year.
Yeah. So the example I gave to Jamie in the car coming down here today, I thought was a
who
good
goes
one.
Who goes to see the Tigers?
So the question I asked Jamie
people that wants to see the visiting team. I didn't have that answer.
No. So the question I asked Jamie, I put Jamie on the spot in the car.
He did.
We had a 5-hour drive down here, so we had time to talk. And so
I had this for 5 hours.
I told Jamie, I said, I'll keep this short. He goes, why? We have 5 hours to drive. So, but
it's a nice drive.
Yeah, it's a great drive. It's a great drive. See some beautiful mountains come down here. So it's hills and mountains. Yeah. But so, anyways, so the question I asked Jamie was, I said, why do the Detroit Tigers draw 20 or 30,000 fans a game as they do? Right? Why do they draw 20 or 30,000? Because there's another league called the USPBL, the United Shore Professional Baseball League, in a small independent league over in Utica, which is only 20 miles away. And they draw 500 to 1,000 fans maybe a game. And I said, why is it that the Tigers draw 30,000 fans, 20 to 30,000 fans, and over here there's just a few miles away? There's a team, that only draws a fraction of that number. Yeah. And the idea is it's because who do the Tigers play? The Tigers play Chicago. They play New York. They play Boston. They play Pittsburgh, the biggest cities in the country. And so you have the biggest name, you have the biggest, most prestigious names in the country. So in the wager is this: if the Tigers, if for 162 games they were playing Bug Tussle, Wisconsin, they're playing, like there's some random teams, like some cities that nobody's ever heard of. I wager that the Tigers attendance, their own prestige would carry them. So they might not go down to 500. But what I'm saying is that it's about the prestige of the matchups that you put on the field. It's about the compelling nature of the games that you field. If you can have rivalries are another key component. The prestige in the more important something is, the more people want to see it. If it's a reality show, if it is a sporting event, whatever it is, the more prestigious, the more important, like the U of M versus Ohio State. That's a perfect example. It's about prestige. It is about prestige, and it is about what is on the line. It's about the civic pride that is on the line.
Am I allowed here because I am
35 Tigers have that moxie?
What's that?
Did the 35 Tigers have that whole moxie that you're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sure they did.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that the rivalry between Ironton and Portsmouth even involved the stadiums because they had Beechwood before Portsmouth had any stadium.
Yes.
So when Portsmouth was trying to get a stadium built, they said, "Hey, come on, Ironton has
a stadium. Exactly.
We've got a better team. We've got a great team. Why don't we have a stadium?"
Yeah, at first they were unsuccessful too. At first they tried to get it put on the ballot for 80,000 and they rejected it. The voters rejected it. Yes. Yep. So the idea was, that was the reciprocal component of football. That's what built these sports in the earliest days, was the desire to have bigger and more prestigious matchups, to have prestige, to be able to lure bigger and better teams to your city and not have them come down and then just crush you. You wanted them to come onto your turf so you could beat them and show that you're more prestigious and that you can be lured to other cities. And it's like that's a sort of an analytical breakdown of that concept, but it all boils down to the simple idea of the civic pride and wanting to reach for something bigger and better, and to have your city to be counted among the bigger, the best cities in the country. And like I say, that component, I believe that's what began sports in America. It was that civic pride. Today, I'm not going to sit here and go on this rant because I go on rants about modern day sports.
You're already on it.
Okay. Well, but the idea. So yeah, right. You're right.
You're way past that.
Yes. So the idea is that is what. So this is in the earliest days. That's what. So Ironton had that, and so Ironton at one point, when they were the presidents, the Ironton wouldn't even play Portsmouth. They're like, you're so below us. Your team folded in 1925, and you're so weird. We won't even draw anybody if we play Portsmouth.
They even had a B team. Ironton had a B team called the Panthers.
Oh, did they really?
And they played the.
Oh, did they really? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So the idea though was that's why I think it's essential to talk about Ironton, to mention Ironton in the Domus, because they sort of served as the benchmark, the hurdle that Portsmouth was like, we are the biggest city around. Year after year, they failed against Ironton. Then the team folds in 1925. And I'm reading the book, right? Again. It says at that point, the smokehouse failed. And then I'm like, well, they're done. This team is stunk, man. They're so bad. And the guy actually has a quote. He has a great, Carl Becker's a quote. He says, "No one in Portsmouth mourned the passing of the team." That's what he says. So nobody cared that the Portsmouth smokehouse died. It was done. And I'm like, man, this team, Portsmouth might as well just hang it up. But that's where the story begins. And that's why I think one of the most important elements of this entire memorial thing that we're talking about is because they didn't give up. The team failed and they stunk. They never beat Ironton. Ironton was a dynasty and Portsmouth was nothing. And so they did not give up. They came out in 1926. I thought this was fascinating. There wasn't just the one team, the Presidents. There was a brief team called the Portsmouth Merchants. And they were both there was a new field emerging called LeBold Field. And the two teams both wanted to play there. And so it came to the situation where, they were both trying to book the stadium and try to lure the city founders, the fathers, to give them the rights to use the ballpark, to use the stadium. And then they ended up having to play each other, which the Presidents won. And that wasn't completely the deciding factor, but the idea was that the Presidents kind of swished the Merchants out of the way and they kind of faded pretty quickly.
Well, Portsmouth had a huge industry then in the early 10s and 20s. Well,
they
had
back
the
to
Selby Shoe Company. They were right on the river and sent coal in and out. They had a Coke plant. They had a Mitchell Lace shoelaces, and
the
these
rail
were
yard
all
too.
National companies out of Portsmouth. So when they were called the industrials or whatever, that's because all these people were putting some cheese behind them to get them playing.
Sure. And then in 1927, the very next year after 26, they actually had a pretty good year. And I think they ended up. It says So they actually the Presidents the Presidents lost against the Tanks that year 9-0 in 1926. And but the thing was that they gave the Tanks a pretty decent game. And so the very next year, then this, like I say, this is what I think is so interesting is that, they had a decent year, whatever. Okay. They staved off the complete demise of Portsmouth football. And you're still, when you're kind of following the story, you're going, yeah, but they got beat by Tanks. They're still miles away. And so, but it's at this point that the things are starting to heat up a little bit because they go sign Jim Thorpe. Like some of these team founders and that they go sign Jim Thorpe, and they bring him in there. Jim Thorpe, of course, was an absolute legend. He's 40 years old at this time. He had already played for 8 different NFL teams, and now the team has changed their name to the Portsmouth Shoe Steals.
That's
yes.
right.
So the Portsmouth Shoe Steals, that's what they become. And Jim Thorpe is the coach and player. They go to a 7-4 record, and they get their first win against Ironton in 1927.
Wow.
So I don't have the score written down here, but I don't think it wasn't a landslide. It was they squeaked out a win against Ironton.
The story goes in Portsmouth that Thorpe was brought in with the sole purpose of defeating Ironton.
And that supports what I'm trying to say here, which is that they didn't give up. They didn't give up. They brought in Jim Thorpe.
Go big or go home.
It's
go big or go home.
You see, they're like, we're so what if Ironton's a dynasty? You know what? We're gonna be a dynasty too. You know, like we don't care. Their entire history was awful, and they still stuck it out. They brought in Jim Thorpe. You know, he wasn't the number one guy that just dominated every game. He was a 40-year-old guy. He contributed. There's no doubt. But it was a signal to their fans that we're not done.
Right.
We're not done. We're still coming out. We got Jim Thorpe now. What you think about us now?
Well, if you want to promote a team,
what do you think about us?
If you want to promote a team, having Jim Thorpe out there on the field, I mean, you can't beat that.
Yeah, first game, because before that their attendance was dreadful. It was like 500, maybe 1,000 for these.
How many gold medals did Jim Thorpe win in the Olympics?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, man. No, you're putting me on the spot. Yeah,
I'm gonna. Was it 5?
4 or 5.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thanks
for putting us on the spot. Make us for history, guys. You make us look like a bunch of idiots up here. Thanks a lot, Will. Hey, anytime we need to look like idiots, we'll just call Will over here. So, which I need that often, Will. Thank you. So, anyways, what was interesting is, the Portsmouth was drawing like 1,000 fans a game. Previous to this, because nobody, the team was not that great. But with Jim Thorpe, their first game, they have 2,500 in attendance. So it's the largest crowd ever up to that point. Now they're at LeBold Field, which is an upgrade from the Millbrook Park. Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, is LeBold Field the precursor where the stadium is now? Is that the same site?
That's right.
Okay,
that's
good.
right.
So 2,500. So they capture the fans are like, hey, Jim Thorpe's here. Let's go watch a game. And that's the spark. That's the thing that's starts to get them going. Then they beat Ironton. Hey, maybe there's something here, and they go into 1928, and this is where it really starts to get interesting, because now they have they create a board of directors. They create this as they're like, we're going to approach this this football team in Portsmouth. We're going to approach this with seriousness. We're going to have an entire business community that's involved with this. We're going to have a board of directors. We're going to have a president. We're going to have a vice president. We're going to have all these people, and we're going to pound the pavement and use our people. We're going to use our resources at our businesses to sell tickets, to promote games. That's what I'm saying. This is the definition of civic pride. Why did they do it? Why did they create this board of directors? Was this for them? These are all guys are already successful businessmen. They don't need to get into football to make oodles of money. They're doing it because it's for the pride of Portsmouth, for the city pride. And so they're like, but if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And so that's what changed. They had this board of directors of guys that were all successful businessmen. They said, let's do this right.
Portsmouth was known as the Peerless City. The Portsmouth Brewery that my siblings own, made a beer called the Peerless Beer in honor of that.
Okay.
That Portsmouth was known as the Peerless City. So we had a lot of civic pride, and we, like Randy Yohe said, we were industrial at one time, and I appreciate you guys bringing that up.
Yeah.
So I love your building. What was it prior to being a brewery?
It's a beautiful building. Absolutely.
It's always been a brewery. It's one of the oldest buildings. It's one of the oldest
buildings. Was this a firehouse? Because it looks cool. It looks like a cool old firehouse.
It's one of the oldest. It may have been a firehouse initially back. It was built in 1842. No, it was could have been used for for a fire. I don't know.
Okay.
But 1842 was when the brewery was built.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
We need to get back down there so I can show you the basement.
Tom wants to say something. Tom, what you got to say?
Hey.
You were talking about Jim Thorpe.
Yeah.
In the war years, he came to Henry Ford, brought him to Detroit. And my father worked with him for 1 week in the oil house at the Ford Motor Car Company. My father went out and actually drank with Jim Thorpe.
That's awesome.
And Jim Thorpe went across. If you come to Dearborn, I'll take you right to the bar that he was. And he went into the bar, and there was a lady bartender. And he said, Jim wants big drink. Well, the lady poured him no, bigger drink. Poured him a little bit more. It went to the top.
Down
That was it.
Down it
But
went.
he went with Jim Thorpe. And my greatest disappointment was that he did not get Jim Thorpe's autograph. But he was with him. He was with him for 1 week, and Ford had him there for years. It was under Harry Bennett, under the.
So actually, when we were talking about the medals, he won 2 gold, 4 overall.
There we go, Jamie. Way to come in there with the
That's
facts.
Jamie looking up some facts.
Jamie grounds us in the facts.
Me and my buddy Google figured that one out.
Now on Thorpe, we've been trying to track down historical locations here in Portsmouth, connected with Thorpe. And there is a rumor that has long been going around that he had a regular poker game here in actually a neighborhood called Sciotaville.
Mm-hmm. Is that how you say I call it Scioto. It's
Scioto.
Scioto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sacadilliac?
Scioto County.
Okay, I got you.
And Sciotaville.
Okay.
And so apparently,
I'm gonna have to retrain my brain because I've been saying Scioto for so long. It's gonna have to just bear with me on that. But
that's all right. That's all right. But yeah, so any listeners out there that happen to know, where Thorpe had his poker game, I would love to
know.
Jim
Thorpe information.
We're trying to locate that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It was always I am from Saldeville. I've been there generations, but it was rumored that Thorpe played poker or cards at Dr. Hartledge's house in Duvendeck's old building in Sciotaville. That much I know.
I've got a Jim Thorpe story too, and this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite Jim Thorpe stories. I saw it in a book. It's like an old Leatherhead football book, but it's almost like so. Anyways, so the story goes like this. It's about Newt Rockne and Jim Thorpe. Okay, so the story goes something like this. Jim Thorpe, I believe, was playing for the Massilian Tigers. Or maybe it was the Canton Bulldogs, and Newt Rockne was playing for the Massilian Tigers, and he was a rookie. And he was playing defensive end at the time, and Jim Thorpe was a running back. And so Jim Thorpe gets the ball, and he comes running, trying to get some yards, whatever, off tackle, and Newt Rockne tackles him. And Jim Thorpe gets up and he says, "Rock, what are you doing? You got to let old Jim run. You got to let old Jim run, Rock." And so he gets up and he goes back to the huddle. Right. And then the next play happens. In the same play, he runs off tackle again, and Newt Rockne slams him down, makes the tackle, right? And Jim Thorpe gets up and goes, "Rock, what are you doing? You got to let old Jim run. You got to let old Jim run, Rock." So he goes back to the huddle, right? Same thing. The very next play, the ball is snapped, and Newt Rockne has no idea what happened, but he's like on his back and shaking it off. He looks up behind him, and Jim Thorpe's running for a touchdown, like 80 yards or something. And as Jim Thorpe comes running back, he goes, "There you go, Rock. The way to let old Jim run." That's what he bowls him over. He goes, "Way to go. There you go, Rock. There you go. Let old Jim run, Rock." So I've always thought that's one of my favorite early football stories is Jim Thorpe, Newt Rockne.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
And so, there are some there are names in this story that are storied names. We're gonna get to Lambeau. It's amazing. It's amazing.
So the story continues. It's just kind of build. So 1928, they bring in this board of directors. They start to run this. Is like, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this we're gonna bring our assets to bear. We got the business community. We got the population. Now let's start to, so one of the first things they do is they try to get a $80,000 bond passed on the ballot to get a stadium, and it gets rejected, unfortunately. But at this exact moment, so they sell shares in the team to the community, raise some money, and at this time they open up a competition for this is 1928, and the name Spartans is chosen by a special committee from a list of 100 names. And the name came from the suggestion of the Trojans as the high school football team name, which I believe is still the high school name, right?
Trojans,
yeah. So there was an association with the high school team.
Stay safe.
So they're kind of looking at it in a similar way that as like Ironton, where there's an association with the high school, which didn't really end up playing out in the case of Portsmouth, but they were kind of looking at that association for the name. And so in 1928, so they're not, this is just them. They're still semi-pro. They're still have no defined schedule. They still have they're just trying to, make it in the world of football. They're trying, the Ironton is still a dominant player in this world. And so, so 1928, they come out and they have 2010. I don't think Jim Thorpe was there anymore. He was just the 1 year that he played, right?
That's right. Just 1 year.
Single year. Yeah. So they come
10
out.
games.
So they have 2,000 attendance at Le Bold for their first game, which is decent, nothing fantastic. The idea was that the team needed 3,000 fans a game to break even. But at the same time, they were able to draw Ironton to Portsmouth. And at that time, Glenn Presnell is now the starting quarter. He's a player manager for Ironton at this moment. And so they lure Ironton to Portsmouth, and they tie them, which is like a huge deal. They're like, we got to tie, and there's 5,000. They're in 5,000. But to show you the example I'm talking about, they had 2,000 attendance at their first game, and I didn't write down who that team was. But when the Ironton team came to town, they had 5,000. So that's what prestige does to a city. That's what it does to drive your attendance up. Is when you have a prestigious team like the Ironton Tanks come to your city, and it's a rivalry city, of course. Now it goes from 2,000 attendance to 5,000. Wow. So it shows you this is not lost on these board of directors and them. They're like, the more prestigious teams that we face, the better our attendance is. And so you're like, but there's only one Ironton in the nearby area. We want to face off against the Packers. We want to face the Bears. We want to face these bigger city teams in order to have these big attendances so that we can get these 3,000 fans a game we need to at least break even. And then the more fans we get over 3,000, the more money we have to buy bigger and better players. And then they're thus far compete at a higher level.
So the stadium that we're going to be celebrating tomorrow, we're talking about 1928 here. When was that stadium built?
1930 is when it was begun.
So 1930.
Yep.
So
it
we're
took a couple
we're
years.
growing.
Yeah, we're growing. Yeah. But it was still a couple years
and
out.
They need a bigger space because we're growing. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm early. I'll ask.
Yeah. So
keep going, Charles. Keep going.
So 28. So this idea to them. So this idea to them is really sinking in. They're saying, they're recognizing that for Portsmouth the idea is that they need bigger draws. It's not about just having a football team and winning some games and whatever. It doesn't mean if you beat, the local, somebody from that nobody cares about, nobody cares. Nobody's there to watch. If a tree falls in wood, who's there to watch it? No, if they're not there, nobody cares. So 1929, they keep, they're sort of evolving. They're bringing in sort of bigger players, bigger name players, because they're having these games where they're drawing 4,000 or 5,000 fans. The 1929 is the first year of Roy Father Lumpkin. He's a rookie. He's from Georgia. He's one like if it wasn't for Presnell, he would probably be my favorite player. He was an absolute everybody. He was I already saw he was a Detroit. He came to the
Did he make it to Detroit?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 1934. And he was an absolute fan favorite in Detroit. Right. He scored Detroit's first touchdown I believe on an interception. And so, but he was an absolute massive fan favorite in Portsmouth. There's a quote. There's this great quote that kind of shows somebody wrote a poem back in his day about
poems.
Father Lumpkin.
I got poems. All right, no, sorry.
Spit it with
I'm
us,
channeling
Jimmy.
the dice
Share
man over here. No, you don't want any of those.
This was a poem that somebody wrote at the time because there was a situation where for some reason they thought Father Lumpkin had left the team, and so they were so worried that he had left that he was never going to play for the team again, for he was just going to visit a sick brother or something. He wasn't, but they thought that he was never coming back. And he was so beloved at this point in the community. This was a poem somebody wrote at this time. They said, "Oh Lumpkin, Father Lumpkin, to whom the Spartans pray. We had you for a moment. Oh, why could you not stay? You lifted up our spirit, made peerless grid fans gay. But now that you have left us, we'll paint the flood wall gray." There's this mournful, this dirge to the loss of Father Lumpkin. He was an absolute beloved figure.
And this was still great today.
Yeah, this was his rookie year.
That's just
and then they're talking about flood walls.
So kind of great.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, so they had they had the flood walls in there. It's that was a iconic thing in their day, And so and then they have Claire Randolph. They start to get a couple of guys that we're going to recognize in 34. And they opened their first opening game. They get a big game against the Green Bay Packers.
Oh wow!
In 1929. And they ended up. It looks like they had. I don't have the attendance written down for that game, but anyways, they they're rolling around. They're drawing more. They're drawing bigger teams. They're making a little bit more money. They're drawing bigger names, and they say this. Carl Becker talks about how Portsmouth is football crazy at this point in 1929. Did you guys have anything you wanted to jump in? They say it's So anyways, they're they're kind of rolling. So Packers, the Portsmouth lost 12-0 to the Packers in that first game. So and so anyway, so at this time, the Portsmouth Football Association changed their name to the Portsmouth Football Corporation, which is, I guess, the next level up for their group too. So anyways, so they're rolling right along. Did you
I was just going to say about the rivalry. You were talking about the rivalry between Ironton and Portsmouth. There is a rivalry that's going to develop early on, between the Spartans and Green Bay.
Sure.
And a lot of that is because a lot of the players, and even like the coaches. So you take Walt Jean, who was on the Shoe Steals. He was brought in from Green Bay. He ended up being sort of the assistant coach to Thorpe. And when Thorpe left at the end of the season, there was a postseason game against the Ashland Armcos, and Walt Jean was the coach player for that. And so when the Spartans were formed, Walt Jean was actually the first coach.
Yes, he was. Yeah, I have that written down too. Yeah.
And he has been almost whitewashed out of the history somehow.
Yeah. So he says, well, because there's so much history to it. The thing is, one of the points there is the early history of the Spartans altogether is whitewashed. Yeah. Whenever they talk about the Portsmouth Spartans, it's look at the Wikipedia page. Look at the Wikipedia page when they talk about Portsmouth. The Portsmouth Spartans history starts when they joined the NFL in 1930, right?
Yeah.
So 1930 is when the Portsmouth Spartan history starts. That's why I want to take this opportunity to go through some of this early history in the evolution of their rise to the NFL, because a lot of times when they see it, they go, oh, the Portsmouth Spartans are around for 4 years, right? They had these incredible moments, which were, integral to the history of the NFL, but there was so much that happened before it. And there's so much to kind of learn from that idea that this was a team, this was a city at this time that would not give up. They would not, they were a terrible team early on. They changing their names. They're trying to move, they're mixing and matching until they found sort of what worked for them, which was that they, and this is what they began to realize very quickly, is that they needed, and in fact, I have the quote where they talk about, they actually said, we actually need to, we need to be in the NFL. That's our goal, because it, like, here we are sort of picking around the edges, trying to find, trying to find, these like the Ironton Tanks and this, Cincinnati, whatever, Redlegs or whoever was Dayton Triangles. They're trying to lure these teams to say they got one NFL game, and so they're everything's they're supposed to be sort of celebration about with this one NFL game they played against, and they're like, no, we want to have an entire season. We want a whole season where we're playing against NFL teams.
Well, the guy that ultimately had the most shares of the Spartans, a guy named Harry Snyder. Harry Snyder basically said, look, after that first year of the Spartans, when they were not in the NFL, and they were trying to build a stadium here, it got voted down, and Harry Snyder was like, I'll build that stadium.
Yes.
But you got to get an NFL franchise.
Yes.
The only way I'll build this stadium is if you get a franchise, because that's the only way we're going to have the number of people come to our games, because we're going to bring in the big teams, the big names.
Yes.
We're going to bring in Chicago Bears.
Exactly.
We're going to bring in the New York Giants. We're going to bring in the Packers. But we can't do that unless we have an NFL franchise. And, in order to build the stadium, you had to get the franchise, because you weren't going to have the visitors showing up and buying the tickets.
Exactly. And so 28-29, they're playing, they're sort of still a semi-pro team. But they're improving dramatically. In fact, in 1929, they blow up. They finally put to rest Ironton. They annihilate Ironton. In their first game, they played the Tanks 3 times. 1929, they lost 3-0 in their first game. But in the second game, they blew them out 20-0. And in the final game of the season, it was 38-0. They annihilated Ironton. And so I have another great line by Carl Becker, this great quote about the destruction.
I got a rant while you looked at it. I got a rant and rave about Carl.
Carl rant. Spit it out. Let it
because
go.
we were talking about when we were talking Garwood in the boat and about the book that we read and the information we pulled from that book. The writing was so amazing, and the quotes that we were sharing on our 5-hour drive here.
Yeah. I was like, Gee, listen to this.
But the quotes are great. Awesome. The writing in this book is great. And this is a more recent book. He was like, yeah, it was a long ride. It was
Jamie,
read it. But but the writing in here again, like that,
right.
like the Garwood. But and this is a more recent book. It was written, came out in '98.
Yeah.
Just magnificent writing. I got a props to Carl. It's a great book.
Yes. So this is a quote this is after they after the 38-0 drumming they put on Ironton, right? So this was it. Once they destroyed Ironton, once they were ahead of Ironton, superiority of talent, all this, it's only then they had the confidence to say, if we can dismantle Ironton, we can tear up anybody.
Yeah.
That's right. Now it's time to join the NFL. And that's what I'm saying. This is the point in the story where the Wikipedia and the NFL.com and all the history of the Spartans, this is where they begin, which is them joining the NFL. So what we have just heard, really for the first time on
this
film,
has been the prologue so far.
This is the prologue to the story of the Portsmouth Spartans that everybody has heard. You see, we have what we are unfolding here. Really for the first time is the story of the Portsmouth Spartans and how they got to the NFL. There's more to the story than simply like the Portsmouth Spartans got an NFL team and then they did this and then they did that. No, there was a story of before it, and that story is a story of perseverance against ridiculous, like basically failing over and over and over and over again, tenacity to get through it, bolstered by civic pride. Have we heard of anything lately about any of this stuff in Portsmouth? It sounds like something going on with the certain city local.
That's right. Persistence and
the comeback city is Portsmouth currently. That's what I'm saying. Like, if there's any reason, like we're talking about, we're going to get to the Ironman game. We're going to be there tomorrow at the stadium. You know, we got all kinds of stuff to continue talking about. We're going to have additional footage for that. But what I'm saying is like, it's an opera. It's not, like any time, like whenever they mention a quote, like on like they're watching the Thanksgiving game with the Lions, they're like, oh, and 34 was the Lions' first Thanksgiving game. No, that's great. But the thing is about it is that's an opportunity to just do more than just go, oh, it was the first Lions Thanksgiving game. Like, well, what about the team? Can you tell me about who these guys were? I mean, it's an opportunity. You've got people's brains for a moment linked and going, oh, 34.
Yeah.
Well, that's your opportunity. And that's what I'm saying. Like, this is our opportunity now with celebrating this incredible game that we're going to get to, the Ironman game. It's an opportunity to tell the story of this team and this city, these players, how it evolved toward that point, in that and it's really one of its signature moments in how they got there, besides just a quick fact on Wikipedia. You see what I'm saying? That's where we're at. Yeah. And this was the moment. This was the moment.
It was not easy getting that franchise.
It was not easy. That's what we're trying to say, is that there was a whole story before, and that's a story. To me, it's one of the most fascinating parts of the Portsmouth Spartans is how they got there. And, the story that as the Portsmouth is told is really begins like halfway up the mountain.
Yeah.
Right. The story we're sort of bringing out right now is how they got, how they climbed, so far.
All right. What's that quote?
So the quote, this is written, this was written after, I believe it was in the newspaper, but it was at the time. But this is after they finally it was over. Ironton was, they were a better team than Ironton, and everybody knew it. So this is a quote. Casey, the mighty Mudville struck out. The tanks, the Chesty, the Cannonville passed out. And in the passing, they went out with their boots on. But that was about all they had on. Is there a fan with soul so dead who never to himself hath said, this is the game for me. Lumpkin and Bennett in touchdowns 3. Up in Ironton on their own doorstep, paying off big that old debt. With a team of stars that shine as gold, that got revenge. Yes, 40-fold.
Oh, nice.
So I like that. It's got a little poetry.
Another little poem.
So exactly. So they finally exercise the ghost of futility of like decades of futility or of this Ironton. And so it's now that they officially say, we are pursuing an NFL franchise. We beat Ironton and we're ready to take down everybody else.
So was it in 30 they became the
NFL
the
very next year? Yeah, the very next year they go to the NFL.
Yeah. So what was the barrier? Was it a money barrier? Was it a?
Well, you're not gonna, if you're gonna join the NFL, if you're ready, if you're gonna, I mean, if you're going, like Portsmouth has just slayed the dragon, the local dragon, and now, like to say, the civic pride says, now let's go see how far we can take it.
Okay.
We've just slayed the local dragon who we've been after for a decade. Now we're looking for bigger worlds to conquer, right? That's what and they were full of confidence. The city is excited.
And it continued in Detroit.
Yes, eventually it would.
Eventually they win the championship in Detroit as the Detroit Lions.
Yes, they would. Absolutely. And they can't, again,
the end.
And so to understand the Detroit Lions, once again, in order to understand the Detroit Lions and then their first championship, it really stretches into this early, because these are the teams, these are the people, these are the players that would eventually go to Detroit and finally, because that was the ultimate, the peak of their mountain of these players and of this franchise was to get to that first championship and win it.
What did it take to become recognized as an NFL team in 1930?
Needed $2,500.
There you go, $2,500
and a stadium.
And a stadium. So was the stadium sufficient, or did they have to grow there in 30?
Well, the stadium was like larger than they expected, because the stadium they originally were kind of thinking of like a 4,000 person, 5,000 person stadium. But then
they built 10,000.
He said he wanted 10,000. And he's like, but we got to get that NFL team. And so they filed
this house.
Yeah, they filed. They got it. So $2,500. This in the middle of keep in mind, the Great Depression had just started. The stock market crashed in 29.
Yeah.
And so the NFL is actually like pretty transient. Like they're turning over. There's like one city after another coming in the league, and so they're like. Hey, you got $2,500, you can join the NFL, so it wasn't like the biggest, like it wasn't like the most, rigorous thing, but they still had to find but what's interesting is in the paperwork, they actually say what one of the themes were, one of the components that we're saying here, they actually filed in their paperwork what we're saying here, which is to quote Carl Becker in which he quotes the NFL document. He says, without a franchise in the NFL, the Spartans could not meet worthy competition beyond the Tanks and Armcos, and that would not and thus would not field a team. So they're either going to reach for the heavens, or they're not going to reach for at all. I mean, we're either going big or we're going home. There's no in between. And that they filed that was as part of their proposal with the NFL for an expansion with the NFL. And so so they recognize that idea that they're trying to go big, or they're not going to do anything. And so they get permission, and so now that the Portsmouth Football Corporation, who is the second incarnation, was Portsmouth Football Association and Portsmouth Football Corporation. Now they are the Portsmouth National Football League Corporation. They are the NFL Corporation. Now it's got some teeth in the name,
Drew, maybe but weren't the Selbys who had Selby shoes? Weren't they owners? Owners?
Homer Selby was the president of the organization for a number of the years. I think. There was another Glockner that I think it was Adolf Glockner.
Yeah, I have him as vice president. Vice president.
Right,
but I think he probably ended up getting as president, because they said Carl Becker talked about he was like intimately involved with many moves in that.
That's right. There. Yeah.
So anyways, in their first year, 1930, they play Newark. Is the NFL team Newark, and so their first game, 4,000 attendance. They're going from 1,000, 2,000, 2,500, 4,000, nice. And then in their second game they played against Brooklyn, 65. They say 6,500 in attendance. So now 6,500 in their second game attendance against Brooklyn, and now against the Tanks, because now the Tanks, they're chasing the prestige of the Spartans, and they're still a big name, they're still a big draw, and so the game against the Tanks, 6,500. And so you see now they're like 4,500, 6,500. This is the big time. This is what it took to draw these big attendance figures. And now they're able to get better players. They're able to, to suit up these guys. So they were right. Long story, they were correct in their assumption that bigger teams and fielding these things would lead to bigger attendance numbers. I mean, they were correct. Better stadium, of course. And now they're drawing fans. So that's where we're at. So that's 1930. That's their first season. They don't have the greatest season. They start out good, but they fade. So their first season, they finished 5-6-3 with 5 wins, 6 losses, 3 ties. They finished 7th in the NFL. So they don't have the greatest team, but they say they start off good. One of the things about that was their coach, which was Griffin. I don't have what's Griffin's first name. Harold Griffin. Harold Griffin. So he ran afoul of their front office, even though he was he was one of the guys that was responsible for drawing some of the biggest names. He knew Curly Lambeau. He was one that was like really getting some of their big games signed up. But one of the things that they have, Carl Becker talks about that kind of earned the ire of the Portsmouth, the corporation, that they earned their ire, was that Griffin had cut Keith Molesworth. And Keith Molesworth, anybody that's into the early leatherhead football, Keith Molesworth was a stud. He was a stud, and he'd been one of the key backs. He was a key halfback for Portsmouth, and in the first year, I think he played for 2 years prior, and he was cut because he had stolen Griffin's girlfriend and married her.
Oh my gosh.
Shenanigans in Portsmouth.
Well, so he goes, guess what, buddy? I don't care how good you are.
Girl, you don't have a job.
Yeah, guess he doesn't have a job anymore. But in the meantime, Molesworth goes and plays for the Tanks, of course, and plays awesome for them for a year. And then moves on to the Bears for 6 years, and he's a stud for the Bears. Like 34 games, 35. When the Lions are playing the Bears, Keith Molesworth is a major factor throughout and I didn't even know that until I read this book. I didn't even recognize that. I'm like, Keith Molesworth was on the Spartans? That guy was a stud, man. I'm like, why did they let him go? And they're like, oh, the oldest story in the book. He stole the coach's girlfriend, married her. That's the oldest reason in the world, and then so that was one of the reasons why Griffin ran afoul. He gets basically, he doesn't get fired, but he gets demoted. He gets demoted down to what do they say? Demoted to business manager. That's his first. That was the official thing. And then Potsy Clark arrives in the summer for the 1931 season, and this is when so originally I just want to put out some on the air too is. Everything that I've talked about really about how I've given Potsy Clark 100% credit for like the acquisition of Dutch Clark, the acquisition of Ox Emerson, George Christensen, Harry Ebding, all these guys. I've given just pure credit to Potsy Clark, but I've got to insert, especially after reading this book, I've got, you've got to admit when you're, when your topics are, off, when your analysis is off. And so Griffin is the guy, he didn't directly sign these guys specifically, but he was certainly involved in the conversations for a lot of these early stars that were coming to Portsmouth. And so I don't want, I just wanted to kind of point that out was, as my understanding of things, clarifies, I reckon, I'm not afraid to admit when I'm, wrong or going down the wrong path or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's, so Griffin was a key guy. And, and then they would kind of slowly shuffle him out the door. But so 31, this is now we're starting to get into the setup for the Iron Man game. And so 1931, under Potsy Clark, now they've got Dutch Clark, they've got Ox Emerson, Tarzan Christensen, Henry Ebding. They've got these guys that are, they see that Father Lumpkin. They've got these guys that are starting to become like the studs, like these are the guys that are going to make their trip. Also Glenn Presnell. This is the year 1931. Because the Tanks folded in post 1930. And so Glenn Presnell is looking for a job. He comes over. It's an easiest job, switch in the world. He just comes over to Portsmouth. So now they've got Presnell on the same team as Dutch Clark. This team is rocking.
Loaded.
Yeah, this team is rocking. They're loaded. And so they go 11-3. They finish second in the NFL. But here's the thing. And this is the topic that this is, one of the reasons why I love to bring these stories up, because now we're talking about some controversy. We're talking about some controversy. And this story might be, I don't even know what's 2022 minus 1931. Are we at 90 years or 91 years, something like this? It's a long time. It's a very long time. But nonetheless, we're still aggrieved. I'm in Portsmouth. I love Portsmouth. So I can say we. This is kind of my team, 34, 35. We're still aggrieved over this, okay? And the
game never played.
Yes, thank you. There's a grievance that was yet to be settled, and it only was settled with a game as amazing as the Iron Man game. And the grievance begins with the end of this 1931 season, because the Packers, the Portsmouth Spartans, are part of the NFL.
We alluded to this,
yes.
Yeah.
The Portsmouth Spartans are an NFL team,
and let's play.
So the NFL is a league.
Bring it on.
We're at a point now.
We'll come to you.
We're at exactly.
You come to us. Let's play.
We're at a point now where NFL teams are supposed to play NFL teams. This is a league. Now the game is the leagues are supposed to be somewhat sanitized. Now you get your fair play against other teams.
The game's afoot.
So what happens? The Packers have a slightly better record than Portsmouth. But when the two teams meet at the final game of the season, Portsmouth may be in second place. But if they beat the Packers, then guess who wins the NFL championship in 1931?
It would have been Portsmouth.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. Took the words right out of my mouth. So that's the thing. But guess what happens? Dr. Feight, would you?
Oh, we know what happens.
Maybe some of our viewers don't.
Well, the Packers up there, they just decided not to come down here and play.
What?
You could just say we're not going to play you.
Well, they didn't have it signed in. They didn't have a contract signed.
It was tentatively.
It was a tentatively scheduled game. It was not officially.
Tentatively a bunch of wimps. Bring it down here.
Yeah, they didn't have a. We don't. So we don't see a contract anywhere saying that we have to come up there. We don't see a contract up there. So what ends up happening is that the Packers, the Packers win by default. The Packers win by default their third straight NFL championship in a row.
Where's my shenanigans flag?
So of course the Spartans, this is the beginning of this absolute
disdain.
Loathing that the Spartans have for the Packers, saying, we don't care if we play you in Lambeau or you come here. It wasn't Lambeau at the time. I forgot that, but it was. We don't care if you. Lambeau's the coach of the this time. But we don't care if we're in Green Bay or if you come here. It doesn't matter to us. We want a game. We're in the NFL now. And they said no.
We used to mock them. We called them the Cheese Champions.
That was the next point I was going to get to. That was the thing.
The Cheeseheads.
They called them the Cheese Champions. I don't know if that stems directly from that. If they kind of embrace that, like the A's embrace the white elephant or whatever with the flag. But anyways, they were they were roundly mocked by Portsmouth fans, by the Portsmouth players. They called them the Cheese Champions because they were like, this is we got totally gypped. You didn't even win it. You could have played us for and imagine the draw of a game that would have been.
Yeah.
Whether the Portsmouth won or lost, either city would have been a huge draw for either team. But like I say, that's what plants the seed. In Portsmouth, they did not face. They didn't even face him in 31 at all. The last time they faced him was 1930. So they're like, this is a joke. This is garbage. And they petitioned Joe Carr, the NFL, the president of the NFL. And he just says, he's like, well, it doesn't say anything. They didn't write anything down. They didn't, you're right. They don't have a contract. We're just going to kind of let it go. It is what it is. It's just kind of like move on, and they're like, this is, so anyways, that's what sort of plants the seed to this really freaking, this stink that is in the nostrils of the Portsmouth players. And so anyways, so now we're in the 1932. We're setting the stage for this Iron Man game and what this weekend is all about, the celebration of this absolutely legendary game, because this is to paint this whole picture. This is how far, this is the mountain that Portsmouth has climbed from irrelevancy to the NFL to now they're pointing at the Packers and saying, you're Cheese Champions. We want you. We want to mess you up. This is civic pride at its finest. And so it's 1932. But the problem is that Pittsburgh, this is the point where Portsmouth is starting to get into some financial difficulties. Really getting into it. And it takes max effort for this team to open the season, to raise enough money to pay their players, to guarantee these contracts, they have to guarantee money to these other teams when they come down. They might be in the NFL, but they still have to guarantee these, large sums of money.
Dutch Clark is not cheap.
Yeah. Dutch Clark is not. He's one of the best players in the NFL.
Salaries really start to go up.
And wasn't it about this time, Dr. Feight, that they paid the players with a percentage of stock? Was this about that?
I think
they
was factoring it into a certain. They were doing whatever they could. There
was some stock that was given to players.
Yeah, they're doing whatever. They're doing whatever they can. They're doing whatever they can.
Chicken stock. It's a beef stock.
Yeah, they're doing whatever.
Paper stock.
They're doing whatever they can to try to keep the players happy.
On the players.
They're doing whatever they can. They're selling. They're doing whatever they can to get this team in the field, to lure, to raise money and that. So this is when they do start to enter these difficulties. They're calling them, like I say, the Cheese Champions. So in game one, they're going to end up playing two games against the Packers in 1932. The game one against Green Bay, the Portsmouth travels to Green Bay, and there's Packer fans holding signs that say they called us Cheese Champs. Like they're saying, don't forget what they were calling us. Like that was what they knew. They recognized that Portsmouth was dogging them.
Right.
And there's a nagging figure of doubt in the back of their mind saying, Well, we kind of did screw them a little bit. We should have played them. There's no way you can't acknowledge. They can at least acknowledge that kind of. So the Packers aren't really too happy. They're doing their best to look themselves in the mirror, but they're finding a little difficulty at this exact moment because they're like, remember they called us cheese champions. And they're like, well, maybe we kind of are a little bit. They're not going to admit that in public, of course. And so the first game in Green Bay, so through 3 quarters of play, the Spartans are leading 10-7, right? They're about to, vanquish this, and because they're about to vanquish these guys, but then they end up losing 15-10.
Oh,
so they that's
a tight game.
It's a tight game. It's a tight game, and all these, and so everybody's talking, acknowledging how well the Portsmouth played, and to kind of
it's not like they got trounced or they got walked over.
Not at all.
15-10 is a nice tight game.
Yeah. And so anyways, there's this great little quote that Carl Becker says in his book here, where he talks about this exact sort of moment, because this moment here is what sets the stage for the Iron Man game and for the ensuing events to follow. Because the game is now over, and this is a moment of because the Packers are like, see, who's the cheese champs now? We just beat you, And so they got to deal with all this. So this is the moment of high sort of stress and drama, and Becker does a great job of diving into this exact moment. So this is his little quote here, page 274. With Potsy Clark calling on his men to win undying fame for Portsmouth, they headed off to Green Bay by rail, taking the Norfolk and Western and Cincinnati, the New York Central to Chicago, and Chicago to Northwestern to Green Bay. At Green Bay, they faced the Packers at City Stadium and their 6,000 fans. Many reminding them of their decisive taunts about cheese champions and carrying signs reading, they called us cheese champions. A cold, raw wind and rain swept across the field throughout play. At Universal Stadium, 3,000 Spartan fans gathered at a football party to hear TJ Henderson read a play-by-play account of the game received via wire service.
Wow.
So they had 3,000 fans in Portsmouth just listening to the game.
That's great.
Yeah, that's how big the game was.
The stadium. That's like, wow.
Yeah, so the fans cheered through the 3 quarters as the Spartans led 10-7, but then fell silent as the Packers scored a touchdown in safety in the 4th quarter to win 15-10. Though their partisans, the coach, fans, reporters, and directors all praised them for their battle and lauded the Packers for their sportsmanship and clean play, the Spartans did not take the loss gracefully. Mm-hmm. Potsy Clark prompted their indignation by confronting Curly Lambeau after the game, in a caustic verbal tilt. That's a very nice way of saying it's probably some bad words being uttered, alleging that the officials had handed the game to the Packers by their incorrect calls. In his wake, fans and reporters recited a litany of complaints about the game. The officials had made bad calls. The Packers' backs were in motion throughout the game. The Packers had 25 men in uniform in defiance of the league rule permitting but 20 men on rosters. The Packers had earned but 1 touchdown. The Packer fans had rushed onto the field before the game ended. Perhaps the Spartans let go of their anger at the reception given them on their return to Portsmouth. A rollicking, jubilant crowd, reportedly thousands, gathered at the railroad station in a rainstorm and cheered the players as aerial bombs boomed overhead and a band played. So
even though they lost, they got welcomed home as
so the fans are there. The fans are like, we love you guys. That's what I'm saying. Like that captures like that moment and that where they're just everything.
Doc, do you know anything about that?
Yes. Yeah, so it's a moment, but they're furious with this Packers team. They're like, it's still unresolved. We're not done.
Yeah, I mean, that anger over the 31 game not played.
Yes,
is really what drove everything towards the Iron Man game.
Yes, and it's in the message that where Potsy's at the end going, Lambeau, you're a jerk. You don't know anything. You're the loser and all this. You can see him angry.
So this like 2 shenanigan flags.
Yes,
this is a bad reffing on this one. Wouldn't play us last year.
Yes. So here,
what happens next?
So that's the stage for this. This is the Iron Man game. This is the game that we are here to celebrate this weekend. So Becker says it best. We can just spit it out. All of us can spit it out in a couple of words, but far better to enhance the drama through the literary.
It's
word.
Great. This was great.
Yes, yes. So here we go. So this is the second game against the Packers. So keep in mind, this is the setup too. Besides just the anger about it, right? So there's a 3-team battle. This is towards the end of the season. Only a couple games left. And it's at the end of the season. And there's 3 teams in the hunt. There's the Bears, the Packers, and the Portsmouth Spartans. And so the situation is this, is that if the Spartans beat the Packers are eliminated from winning their 4th NFL championship. They're done. Right. And so they're done. In fact, if the Spartans can actually root for the Packers for the rest of the season. And because if the Packers win like one more game after they beat them, then the Spartans would actually win the NFL championship. Right. But if the Bears So but if the Bears also win, then it sets up a tie between. So if the Spartans win, the Bears win, then it sets up a tie in which those teams will play for the NFL championship, which, as we'll see, is kind of a spoiler alert. But this is not only just a rivalry game, but a very important, because if the Packers win, of course, they're about to win their fourth straight NFL championship.
All the marbles right
in Portsmouth at the expense of the Spartans. This is a huge, huge game. And so here we go. So that like sort of sets up the drama of the game. So on the day of the battle, like Shakespeare's Henry V, Powers exhorted the Spartans in the name of a community taking to football like a duck to water and living it throughout the autumnal season. The gates of the stadium opened early before noon on Sunday, and a great traffic jam developed on the surrounding streets. Soon, more than 14,000 fans had pushed their way into Universal in a stadium that holds 10,000. I made up the last bit, but that stadium that holds 10,000. Soon, that more than 14,000 fans had pushed their way into Universal. Hundreds more lined the flood wall. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the rich man, the poor man, all were at the game, said Wittenberg, all forgetting the depression and their worries for the moment. Fans at home could listen to the broadcast of the game on WSAZ in Huntington. All right, Randy Yohe.
Randy Yohe.
Is that station still? Is that still the station?
That's still a station.
WSAZ? Oh. Oh, okay. But is it WSAZ? Is it?
That's
SAZ.
That's Randy
Yohe.
They're still here.
That's amazing.
They're literally right here.
in the
They're
room.
still here. Yeah. So anyways, God, that's crazy. So in the Spartans locker room, emotions ran high. Yeah. Coach Potsy Clark was tense, but ready for the fray, remembering the loss at Green Bay. He and Lambeau had argued heatedly about the officiating, and Lambeau had declared that the Spartans could use their own officials at Portsmouth, but still could not beat his Packers. Clark responded that his Spartans, his Iron Men, would demonstrate their strength in defeating the Packers without using substitutes. Talk is cheap, said Lambeau. True to his word, when Clark sent his starting 11 out to the field, he set his oath before them. I am going to start 11 men, and the only way you're going to come off the field is we have to carry you off. Playing on a dry but windswept field, the Spartans made Clark's word good. Like a trained boxer, Wittenberg wrote, they crossed, feinted, and struck the mighty Packers. They blocked a punt in the first quarter and went on to score a touchdown, then added touchdowns on Clark's running in the third and fourth quarters to win 19-0. The Packers had a slight edge in yardage gain from scrimmage, but could not turn it into touchdowns. The community exulted in the victory, more for its own sake than for the lead in the standings that gave the Spartans over the Bears and Packers. After the game, fans crowded into restaurants and hotel lobbies to celebrate. Powers declared in his lead editorial that many years would pass before the memory of the game faded. For the community, the victory went beyond its wildest dreams. A great day for Portsmouth. The story of the victory without substitutes did, in fact, become a part of local lore, long enshrined in the community's memory as the day we beat the Packers. In the game had material benefits too. The directors were well pleased with the financial results.
Man,
is that like
excellent.
Yes? Tell me that.
So I tell you that writing.
They're talking about us
Yeah.
in this book right now. That it's long lived. You know that this is it.
So all right. So the 11 men that were on that field, we got the list of. He's gonna hop in. Who were those 11 men?
Yeah, we're gonna read off the 11 men. Come on over here. We got a special guest to read the 11 men. Tell us your name, bud.
Hi, my name's Grayson.
You're good, bud. We got you.
Okay, so the 11 men were Ray Davis, Mary Bodinger, Glenn Presnell, Roy Father Lumpkin, Leroy Irwin Ace Gutowski, Earl Harry Dutch Clark, William Bill McCallop, Harry Joseph Ebding, George Washington Christensen, Claire Randolph, and Gover Connor Ox Emerson.
Thank you, bud. Yes, nice job. So so if you got a glass, let's raise it up for fine reading, fine reading kid, and also for these. Like I say, you have 11 men, like say play a full game of football. It's to knock the Packers out of the championship. And that's why we're here to celebrate today.
And that leads us to the celebration that we're here today. They won that game. And
they set up the final. They set up the tiebreaker against the Bears. You want to finish? Take us home with the championship.
So the historical significance then of the Ironman game is that it led to the first postseason championship game.
The tiebreaker between the Bears and the
created
Spartans.
what we have as playoffs.
Yes. It was the first Super Bowl. It was the first NFL championship game.
Ultimately, the first Super Bowl.
Prior to this, if you had the best record, you won the championship. That's all there was to it. There was no World Series type game. The NFL for years had wanted this in a World Series type game, and now they had it inadvertently. Yes. They didn't even plan it like this.
And that first game against that first championship game, the Portsmouth Spartans against the Chicago Bears, was also the first indoor football game in NFL history.
They played at Chicago Stadium in a hockey arena. They had to shorten the game. Yeah. They're shorting the field. They had to change the rules a little bit. So it was like kind of like playing street football where you had to only go a certain length, and then you had to like go back 10 yards once you reached a certain spot. Like there were some clauses in the rules, but it set up the Iron Man game, one of the most legendary games ever. That's what's so great is like this is where like the history fascinates me. It blurs the boundaries of like magic and lore and like. Why wasn't the Iron Man game? Why wasn't that the second game of the year? That was just a random game.
Yeah.
Why didn't they play 11 guys, against the Packers and, or against against the Bears or some random, like this? That game led to the first NFL championship game. They knocked out the Packers, their hated rivals. Like, they purposely sort of hamstrung themselves in facing them and saying it was just pure moxie. It was pure just saying
11 guys playing both sides of the ball.
Yes.
The whole game.
Yes.
Those 11 men.
19-0.
19-0. They smoked them. And as they smoked them. And it sets up this game. And then here's what's the sort of postscript to that is that the NFL was, they drew pretty well for it. It was in the middle of a blizzard. That's why they played indoor in Chicago. They couldn't even use Wrigley Field. It was just too covered in snow. That's why they played indoors, and from what I understand, it was a well attended. It wasn't like they drew 30,000 or something. It was a well attended game. But what it did was it showed the NFL a new path, saying we want to do one of these championship games every single year. So the very next year, the league was split in half. The very next year, and every year thereafter, there was the NFL championship game. Every single year, the winner of each division would play each other, and of course, the rest is history. The 60s, they would merge with the AFC, and they would have the Super Bowl, and so that's what I'm saying. Like this was the first, and it began when the 11 men took the field against their hated rivals, and they did so because they just wanted to. Like they had civic pride, and it was their pride of the person and saying, we are going to take this ball and we're going to drive it down your throat and we're going to beat you. And we're going to, and yes.
90 years
so
ago.
So I'm saying like, it's such a phenomenal story. It's such a phenomenal thing. Me and Jamie were absolutely, we got the invite from you guys. We got we've already covered the Ports. We did a lot on the Spartans and the Lions. We already did a 10-part segment on them a while ago.
Yeah.
But but that doesn't matter. We're doing. We hear there's something that you guys are doing some in Portsmouth. We hear about a great group of guys that are celebrating, and we're we were absolutely honored to be down here to talk some history and to be where this stuff happens and
well, we really appreciate you guys coming down here to celebrate with us.
My absolute pleasure.
I know it's a 5-hour trek, but we
really
appreciate you.
Yeah, we had a good time just hanging out, talking.
Like the birthplace of the Detroit Lions.
It's the birthplace of the Lions. We're gonna be watching the Lions game tomorrow. We're gonna be checking out the stadium tomorrow.
And like
we're gonna have some footage.
Carl Becker said in his book, probably some 22 years ago now, 24 years ago now, when he wrote, he said that the community would be celebrating this for years to come. And that's very, very true, because that's why we're here for a huge celebration, and it's being recognized nationally. It's Tom just shared this with me, a letter from the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and it's signed here from the current president Jim Porter of the Hall of Fame, and it's a proclamation from the Board of Trustees from the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a resolution for the celebration coming up tomorrow for the Portsmouth Spartans. December 4th, 2022, whereas the Portsmouth Spartans joined the NFL in 1930 and made an immediate mark on the young league. And whereas in 1931, Pro Football Hall of Famer Earl Dutch Clark joined the team along with NFL legends George Potsy Clark, George Christensen, Grover Ox Emerson, and Glenn Presnell. And whereas today we recognize the Spartans' famous victory over the Green Bay Packers in the Iron Man game on December 4th, 1932. And whereas The victory in the Iron Man game propelled the Spartans to face off against the Chicago Bears in the NFL's very first postseason game. And whereas the Spartans game against the Bears changed how the NFL would crown its champion every year and forever the history of the league. And whereas the Portsmouth Spartans franchise continues today as the Detroit Lions, and therefore let it be resolved. The Pro Football Hall of Fame celebrates Portsmouth community for dedicating a new sign for the Spartan Municipal Stadium, original home of the Portsmouth Spartans, and their continued effort to educate the public about the impact of the Spartans had on the history of professional football. And again, signed by Jim Porter, the president of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And it's
so awesome.
That's it's a big day tomorrow. And Tom's choked up. I love Tom's choked up. Tom, what's this? Tom,
I don't know if anybody loves these teams and players
Tom,
more than
why
Tom.
is this? Why is this choking you up? Why is it important?
If there's a flood in this room, it's not the Ohio River.
We got the flood wall. Yes.
Why is this important to you, Tom? Why is this choke you up like that? What's this? Why does this get to you?
It all goes back to 1985 when I sat down with these Spartans. And these Spartans told me the story. There was 2 tables, if you remember, in the earlier episodes that we did.
Yes.
These kids came from here, and there was only 12 of them, and they went up with the other ones. But they had the City of Champions, and they were all there, and they had a wonderful dinner, a celebration, and we're going to go to one tonight, and it'll be the close of the bookends to bring the history together. Portsmouth was never mentioned, ever. In that meeting, and those Spartan players, those 3 players resented that, and the ones that were there, because originally there was 13 or 12, and they were really, it was all Detroit. They rammed Detroit down their throats. Nothing on Portsmouth, and I promised the players, the 3 players, that I would come to Portsmouth and see if there was anything here that could commemorate the celebration, and there was nothing. And I met Bob Morton, who took me around, and we introduced, and we went to the river, and I met Will, and the rest is history.
Tom,
and I want to thank everybody, because they're remembered and they weren't forgotten, and Portsmouth is going to be remembered forever. This sign will. The children and everybody will come to this city. You're an NFL city, and don't you ever forget it.
Tom, mission accomplished, sir.
Mission accomplished.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Let me just say that Tom called Will, and Will called me, a local radio guy, and said, "What can we do?" And we said, "Let's do something." So
yes.
we'll put a plaque up that'll have Tom Eurich's name on it tomorrow.
Awesome.
And we said after that, what else can we do, Will, to better the city, to better the community, to make Spartan Stadium a little better, because it needs refurbishing, no doubt. We raised over $6,000, and we built a new sign for a beautiful sign that has an old piece of the logo there, and we'll dedicate that tomorrow. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Tom Eurich.
That's great. I love to hear it. Love to hear it.
Thank you for.
I can't wait to go check out the stadium tomorrow. The stadium is going to be the coolest thing. I mean, this is a 1930s NFL stadium, still in like perfect preservation. I was asking these guys today, like, you know, they've made a couple. There's not a ton of I mean, for being a 1933 stadium, I think I haven't seen it myself. So, but in my imagination, it is. I see the outside of it. It looks great.
Chills and goosebumps. Chills and goosebumps. Yeah,
well, that's almost. Thank you, Will. Thanks. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking is gonna happen. But like, you know, there's these movies. There's not a ton of like leather football helmet movies, but the ones that are like, I don't understand. This should be the spot where they film. You've got an ridge. This is like literally an NFL stadium. Like, this is the spot. So I'm hoping that, you know, some people, that they take notice a little bit, and there's maybe some movie deals or something that comes in, and that the deals would help with the preservation in the stadium.
It's a that you've already written for Portsmouth.
Oh yeah, we're all.
I mean, it's a gold mine. I mean, the stories here are absolutely fabulous.
Yeah,
the conflict and the emotion and the glory, it's all there.
Well, yeah, Detroit, with the original location of the Lions, they that's what I mean. That's why the Portsmouth Stadium is such a treasure, because it's you know, it's still like, I mean, it's like you're walking back in time. And so that's why I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's, you know, for those that can still hear, you know, for those that can still hear the leather helmet smacking together.
It's worth a trip to Portsmouth.
Yeah. It's a great city. I got to say something about Portsmouth real quick.
Yeah.
I was here a few years ago. I think that baseball could come back in Portsmouth. This is like, I came down here to bring out, you know, cause we got a professional baseball stadium. I came down here 5 years ago. I think it was 5 years ago. To talk to some people here, and I saw the town, you know, then, and had written a business plan. I had a chance to look around the town, and I gotta say, today was amazing. Something else.
The city's alive. The city is really alive. It's very, very cool.
Special, man.
It rivals, you know. It's as cool as, you know, Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, Old Town, and
you are walking down the streets. You've got these original architecture buildings. You've got original architecture buildings, and you've got these. It's like every store is like people. There's a Santa standing out front of a store today. It's all full of Christmas toys and Christmas. There's a Santa sitting there going, oh, like, you know, looking at him going, hey, what's up, Santa? You know, right. I'm from Detroit, where somebody jumps out wearing a red outfit at you. You're
we're
your
staying and recording.
You know, you're pulling your knife out. You know, you're like, hey man, what's
Airbnb.
What's up, man? You know,
we got our landlords here. A shout out. It's an amazing little space.
But I'm walking on but I'm just seeing that the city, the downtown, is absolutely alive today, man. You have an ice skating rink down there. There's people. They had, what was the prom they had going on today? There was like a prom.
Yeah, it's like winter formal at the school.
They got a winter formal. They got all these kids
everywhere taking pictures.
This is like America, man. These kids are all getting prom photos. They're looking great. These little, you know, these, you know, high school kids. They all look great. They're all taking photos everywhere.
Right.
You know,
Portsmouth is alive, man. Alive and well.
Yeah, it was alive.
And waiting for you to visit. And I'm not even from here. I had to drive 5 hours to tell you.
And by the way, what Jay, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jamie, but you're absolutely right. The place that we're in right now, this Airbnb that we've got, this place, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It's a cool little spot. Yeah,
I mean, very well located, right in the Bony Fiddle. The neighborhood is called.
The neighborhood is the Bony Fiddle neighborhood, which is like one of the coolest names you've ever heard for a neighborhood. You know, and it's like this, you know, we're in this, it's just this, I love this place. And you know, we came down for this event, but I can't wait.
If you like to explore sports history, football history, you got to put this on your agenda.
I can't wait to the next time I come back for like basically whatever reason that is. Like, it's like, hey, Charles, they're having a contest of throwing. Yeah, I appreciate it.
You are welcome back anytime. Like, that's for sure.
Hey, Charles, they're having a you know, some random, you know, name.
Thanks for helping.
I'll be there.
Branch Rickey,
come back for Branch Rickey's 100th birthday. I'm like, oh, that's there. I got to be there for that.
We just want to thank everybody, Grayson. Thanks for reading those names. Everybody who's chiming in on the story, you guys. Thanks for being here. We're going to put links to everybody's businesses and radio shows and everything in the comments. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all those podcast things and all the podcast spaces, and we'll do more with the Detroit City of Champions. Charles has a trilogy of books all about the Detroit story and the Lions. Once they get to Detroit, people should check that out on the website, Detroit City of Champions.
And we have
my name's Jamie. I just say silly things.
No, we have a screenplay. I have a screenplay for a movie written too. I have a screenplay for a movie written, and I just want to let you guys know that when I wrote the screenplay, the script for the, you know, it's divided into, it's a 9-part miniseries, and I've got it divided into like 2 episodes for each subject. Like Joe Louis is 2 episodes, the Tigers are 2 episodes, the Lions are 2 episodes, and the Red Wings are 2 episodes. It can be expanded to Garwood and all this other stuff, but I wanted to lay the base layer foundation first for this movie, for this like a Netflix screenplay. And I just want to let you know that when I wrote this for the Lions segment, it begins in Portsmouth.
Nice.
It begins in Portsmouth.
Has to.
I want to see it filmed here.
It is.
If anything, I want to see it.
It begins in Portsmouth, and it's actually one of my favorite sequences of events in the story. And so, I will promise you one thing with every fiber of my beings right here on air, is that if and when this thing does become a movie, I have this vision of the first epic sports film ever made, a band of brothers, but set to sports. If and when it does happen, we will be filming at Universal Stadium here in Portsmouth.
I want a bet part.
Yes. We got you, Will. Keep feeding you a couple drinks here and there. We'll make sure we'll definitely, that'll be a guarantee, bro.
All right. Thanks for everybody who's tuning in online. Chris, thanks for being there as always. And everybody, thanks for checking out the podcast, Detroit City of Champions. We'll see you again next time.